there's a lot of support or resistance when you see this. So there's a whole slew of ways that you can go about trading this. Sometimes a failed pattern is actually a great pattern, and I'll explain that here in a second, because you have to think of it this way. When the market was falling, buyers came in and aggressively pushed the market back up, just as when it was rallying, plenty of sellers came in to push it back down. So typically, like on a double top, you would see something like this, and some people call it an M pattern, just as they would call this a W pattern. And they would look at it like there's a little trigger point down here in the bottom of the M, and they would take the measurement, and let's just say it's $17. And on a breakdown below there, the target is $17. Typically put the stop loss about halfway through the pattern. That can vary depending on, the personal traits of the trader, the risk appetite, that type of thing. But in general, that's how most people trade it. Just as right here, you would measure this pattern. Let's just say it's $100. You turn around, you break above the top of the W pattern in this case. You aim for $100, you risk 50. It's a built-in, risk 1, gain 2 type of scenario. But let me ask you this. What happens if one of these patterns forms and the markets, instead of breaking down, they turn around and break up? Everybody that was shorting in this area is now in trouble, and they're going to have to close. Now, this doesn't necessarily give you a built-in target, but what it does tell you is that the uptrend is now continuing. So that's something that, you may use along with like a moving average system or Fibonacci projection, extension type thing. It just depends on the circumstance. But a lot of people forget that a failed pattern sometimes is a great signal in and of itself. And I have a couple of examples I want you to take a look at. So right here, you have a double bottom, right? And this is a reversal because we had started falling on the Bitcoin hourly chart. We did have this long wick. There's a little bit of artistic license that needs to be put into play here. That's why I picked this one, because it does show, okay, fine, there's a big wick, but it shows a lot of support, right? A lot of support here as well. We broke the top of this pattern. Remember, we're going to measure the top of the W pattern, right? So let's take that measurement, extend it out, and we clearly hit it. We reacted, and in fact, of course, went much further to the upside. Here's something that's interesting, though. So later on, we ended up forming the same pattern, and people are bullish at Bitcoin at this point. And I think this is a great opportunity. We are pulling back. We formed a double bottom in an uptrend. Should be bullish, right? Well, once you break down below that, anybody in this area that's long is now suffering. Again, unfortunately, you don't really have a built-in target like you would measuring, but it does tell you that something's changed. And that in and of itself is pretty valuable information. You can try different things. You can do simple support and resistance. In this case, 3,600 would have been previous resistance, support, and a round figure. That probably would have made some sense. But that's an example of how you can use a busted pattern. So here on this Ethereum chart, this is actually a triple bottom. They do happen. They're not as common as double bottoms, obviously, because it takes so much more to make them happen, but they are even stronger signs. And all that shows is that there are buyers here right around 1,200 in Ethereum. Clearly we got our move based upon the neckline. You can extrapolate that out. That's about where we stopped initially. And then, of course, kept going. Little bit of a double top there. it's a little slanted for my liking. I tend to play the body of the candlestick, and that is pretty tilted. If it's just a bit, I'm not too worried about it. But when it's a stretch to call that a double top. Certainly, it shows you the same thing. It shows you that it's struggling to get above there. But at the end of the day, you don't want to call everything you can a double top or a double bottom, or in this case, a triple bottom, which I think this one's pretty valid. It is slightly tilted up, but not much. This is a classic double top reversal signal here in chain link on the hour. And what I like about this one is that it's so clean, it's so obvious. You can take the measured move, and it went there almost immediately. Another thing that I like about this is that it's right at the 25 cent to 26 cents level. That's right where you'd expect from a psychological standpoint to see some resistance. And you can see it was a nice move right back down to about 20. So pretty straightforward. Makes quite a bit of sense. Right now, as I record this, there's a little bit of a double bottom that looks like it might get broken to the downside. So that could really get the market selling off. There are other things you could pay attention to. So, for example, I like the round figures, the 25 cents. But Ethereum, let's put a indicator or two on this, and we'll talk about, how that does possibly set you up for a trade. So, here at this triple bottom, you started to see the histogram suddenly explode to the upside on a cross. Now, it was already over the zero line, but it is still a valid signal because of the cross and the histogram exploding. And that was a nice sign on the MACD. You could also put your EMA. It's an hourly EMA. So I like to keep it tight with the 9. You can see it broke above there. That was a signal to get long right at the break, basically. Here on this Bitcoin hourly, there's a couple different things that you can take a look at. So, for example, we're right at the 39,000 level. So that should be support. And the fact that it got broken and then back and retested, pretty significant. Just as this was right at the 30,000 level, so that's pretty significant from a psychological standpoint. You could also take a look at the Bollinger Bands. We pierced it a couple of times here, so we were getting a bit overdone, and we ran higher. And again, it's just a whole plethora of reasons to trade these. These are probably, along with triangles and a few other major patterns, which we'll talk about in this section. There's a handful of patterns that the traders come back to time and time again because they prove to have an edge. They work over the longer term if you take these trades. This is most certainly one of the favorites of traders. In the next video, we'll